Hello, everyone. I'm back for another episode, and I'm super excited to introduce you all to today's guest. On today's episode, I interview an ordained priestess of Isis of the Tantric Rose lineage, a sonic alchemist, and a ceremonial space holder. She recently organized and hosted the 2 week Embodied Creative Summit, which you can still purchase online, the entire summit library, and will be leading an Egypt tour called Into the Mystery, a Journey of Remembering, this upcoming December 2023. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Leah Sonaria.
Hi, Derek. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I had the honor to participate as a listener and audience in your Embodied Creative Summit, where I learned so much from you and your varied guests. And I'm still making my way through that huge library that you recorded. Like that I mentioned, intro, still available for people to purchase on your website, flowpriestess.com. The goal of these conversations is to really to uplift, inspire, and empower everyone tuning in to move forward with greater faith on their hero's journey ahead, stepping outside kind of the known world and into their must, into their calling. And you've done that so many times on your journey. To set us up, I ask like a really positive question. The goal of these conversations is just to really keep it light, keep it positive. And this first question sets it up as such. What do you love about your world right now, Leah? Not about the external, all the chatter, all the media, all the news, but your personal world. What do you love about your life right now?
Such a great question. Well, to be honest, it really is becoming a lot more exciting and magical. And there's a lot of unexpected, delightful things that are starting to drop into my world right now. And these come in the form of other people. Like the summit was an example of me actually just traveling for the better part of this year and then going to different events, festivals, plugging into different conscious communities all over the place in Egypt, and because I was there last year as well, Costa Rica, and also the US. And just on my travel flow, I just started meeting these humans that were inspiring. They were just doing the thing and really tapped into their truth and their purpose. And ever since I began this journey of diving into my own healing and also learning about these ancient arts, these mystical ways, these practices, and incorporating those into my life, I really began to see things shifting in terms of the things I would magnetize. And it doesn't even just stop there with people. It's also just free gifts and opportunities that I wouldn't get in other ways. So I do feel like I'm riding on this current right now, which I call flow consciousness, that really lines me up to the highest possibilities. But it's happening in this way that I definitely could not predict or make up. And I'm really in this deeper co-creation with the universe with how my life unfolds. And yeah, this is another example of that. Just new opportunities just come my way. And it's been a while since I've lived a conventional life in terms of having a 9 to 5 job. I think I've been self-employed since 2012, and so it's always kind of been my way of being, is that I've always sort of made my own way. But now it really feels like there's a deeper co-creation at work, and I'm also surrendering to what the universe has in store for me, which I know is better than I can imagine.
Absolutely. One thing that you shared there is like you met so many people doing their thing, and I see you and like you're doing the thing, but you're also being it. You're also embracing the flow, and I think it's a balance of that being and doing it. And I think some people in the spiritual community, they don't like they only do the one thing, like the being. They just kind of sit there and just think the universe will take care of everything. I don't believe it's such. I believe like it's a balance of the two, doing and being. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, the way I like to look at things is through the lens of the divine masculine and the divine feminine energies. And we have all of them. We have both. And it's a full spectrum. It's not just one and the other. There's definitely many versions and flavors where they blend together. But when I think about it, it's like the doing is the divine masculine and the being is the divine feminine. And how we incorporate the two, which was a major theme in the Embodied Creativity Summit, uh, is really it creates that potential for creation. And you actually get to manifest at a higher level because you have both those energies that are required. You need to have the structure and the plan of the masculine, but you also need to have the flow and that surrendered receptivity of the feminine, so that things just happen in the way they're meant to. And often, most people aren't even aware that those are energies that we're meant to navigate or work with, so they don't really get to know them at that level of not just understanding but feeling it. What does it mean to be in my masculine? And that summit was for sure being in my masculine, where I was very task oriented and there's a lot of things going on. At the same time, there was a deep feminine piece that had to adapt and had to really trust in the process and just go, well, I'm not sure exactly what order all of these things are going to happen in. I'm not sure who's going to come through. I'm not sure what kind of challenges I'm going to brush up against, but because I have that higher vision of bringing something into the world, they do kind of work with each other, and there's that dance that we always have to go through when we're playing with those energies. But for me, that really helps to anchor in sort of a deeper self-awareness around maybe where there are some deficiencies rather with those energies and how we can enhance them a little bit more. So maybe we do need to nurture, for example, our feminine side. And this is really what I would say most people need to focus a little bit more on, is that not pushing and not trying to control everything, but also being in that surrendered state where you can let the magic in and it can guide you, and you can be more in that listening space and feeling into what's needed and then respond from there. So yeah, it really does help to put it into that context, because then we're constantly in this beautiful flow and dance with the divine that wants us to be in our fullness, and then we can fill in those gaps and how we can get there.
Hmm. So, where did you come into your knowledge about the divine feminine and divine masculine? When did you learn about this? And maybe if you could explain the foundations to this knowledge to the audience that has not heard of this or doesn't have great awareness about the divine feminine and masculine and how it applies to our life.
Hmm. Well, I mean, we could just start with divine human. What does it mean to be a divine human? Because that is also a really important concept. One of my teachers, Aline Kalila Dowdy, calls it being fully anthropos, which means being a fully realized human. We've kind of been limited over the last few centuries or millennia in thinking that we are the mortals and the gods are up there. But I would say now we're really starting to understand that the divine is a stream of energy that flows through us and animates us, and we get the gift of being alive as a result. But when we open ourselves to that greater capacity through uh, different techniques of mindfulness and meditation and embodiment work and breath, and understanding all of these really powerful practices that the ancients illustrated to us across many different lineages. And you teach yoga, so you know this. It's something I was dabbling in for a long time, because I've been teaching yoga since 2009. And it's something that at a conceptual level I understood. You also have these mythological frameworks of Shiva and Shakti and Isis and Osiris, and now Mary Magdalene and Yeshua are a big one. These divine consorts of these different relationships, but they are the fully realized version, the healed versions of what it means to be human. And to me, to be a healed human, you have to connect to the source that made you, and that energy that isn't clouded or distorted by religion or certain perspectives that create a very rigid outline of what God is and what you are in relation to it, but rather that it's this journey and this exploration of becoming divinized and realizing that you have the capacity to create at that level as well. So the divine human is really a master creator, because they are they are operating in the image of creator, and creator is universal. There's, it's not just one lineage or religion that talks about it. It's like we are always trying to unpack that question of how did we get here, and why are we here, and who are we as a result of this understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So for my own personal journey, after studying this in yoga, and again at a conceptual level understanding it, my true introduction to the divine was really by understanding what the divine feminine was. And this only happened fairly recently in 2019, where I had a sort of a big breakdown in my life. A lot of things were falling apart. My 11-year relationship was ending after we just bought a house. My company, my clothing company that I had founded and built up for 7 years, was really starting to feel a strain, and I was financially taxed. I had a lot of responsibilities with paying my employees, and things were changing trend wise. And I had built this thing up that I thought was going to sustain me, but then things started going down, and at the end of the day my health was suffering and I just needed to make a change. So I decided to sell my company, and luckily I did find a buyer, but I did feel like it was a failure. And so there's a lot of things. It was kind of my dark night, or it was like a late Saturn return for me. And through that process, I decided to go away to Guatemala and join a circus, which was kind of a crazy thing to do, but there was an opportunity to just get out of my current environment, and I needed to. And at that residency, I learned a lot about different things, energy, flow arts, meditation, sound healing. All these are really amazing things, like ecstatic dance, which I had never experienced before. Things just really started to open up. And also, one of the pieces that came through while I was there was about the female reclamation of our power and the womb and our blood, and all of these ways that we've been essentially deceived into thinking that we were somehow gross or disgusting just for being bleeding beings. And that was a huge one for me. And then that led me to the Priestess path and other teachers that really taught me how to be in my body again. Because for so long, even though I had taught yoga for many years, even it kind of dropped off when I was running the company, but it wasn't this flowy exploration of my body. I never danced before. And when I started doing these ecstatic dances, I would just get into these trance-like states, and certain downloads would start coming in, and I would be like, I'd just be questioning all of the conditions, all of the stories that I had been told about who I was as a woman. And so, yeah, that was a really big one for me. So really understanding that there was this missing link, and it had been shrouded for so long that it literally almost been completely deconditioned out of us to look to the earth as great mother, and to listen to nature, and to go into our bodies and heal from within, and to listen to the voice of our wombs, and to come into right relationship with what we've done as a humanity. And all of these reckoning pieces were coming in really strongly, like one after another, after another, after another. And then the pandemic was really my big initiation happened. I actually got pregnant during the pandemic, and I was really struggling with that decision. I was with somebody I love, but we had only been together for a few months, and we kind of clung to each other during the pandemic, as one does when you think the world is going down and you have your little quarantine buddy. Um, and Yeah, that decision came up, and I really had to think about what I was going to do. And there were some medical things that I had experienced in relation to my reproductive organs several years prior that were, also factoring into whether or not I was, passing up on the one chance I would have to have a child. And that also turned me back to the practice of listening to my body and listening to my womb. And I remember just crying one night, so distraught about making the decision. And some voice just told me, ask your womb, just ask your womb what the right choice is. And so I did, and I sat with it, and it told me that the time isn't now to have a baby, it's time to birth something else. and I listened and I went through with the abortion, and that was my full initiation into the true priestess path, which allowed me to cross that threshold from death to rebirth. And really, having an abortion is experiencing death and birth at the exact same moment. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so deep, and it led me to the goddess Kali, and I started to piece together my story around my connection with her. And she's the goddess of death and destruction, but also the clearing away of everything you're not. She comes with her machete and her fire, and it seems very ruthless and brutal, but her role is really to melt away all those layers of numbness and all the things that have been placed on us to shroud us from our true power as both as men and women. And so that kind of led me onto a memoir journey, and I started writing a memoir, and it's almost done now, but it really helped me unpack what was happening. So that piece about the divine feminine, and understanding her faces as both benevolent mother and also maybe the dark mother that is in service to our rebirth, was a really powerful one. And now I'm going through this process of getting to know what the divine masculine looks like, and returning to certain avatars like Yeshua or Jesus and going, what is really the truth underneath all the different layers of religious interpretation? What was he really trying to say? And both him and Mary Magdalene, who are these amazing avatars that are coming back to light, they were just preaching the power of love. That's it. It really is quite simple, but it starts with that self-love piece of how much do you really love yourself, to guide yourself, or to find the guides to support you in moving through those bardos, through those harder parts of the journey. As we all know, on the hero's journey, there are going to be those trials and tribulations, and you've got to find your intervening mentors, whether it's yourself or someone else. It's usually a combination of those. But to even know that you're on any kind of journey, I think is a really good starting point. And that was really how I began to start to embody those higher realm energies and bring them into my life and commune with them on a regular basis, and know that they are me, but there's different aspects and flavors and energies and archetypes that we all can relate to and embody and learn from. And so it just creates this really amazing mythological storyline that starts to unfold. And it's been wild since then, like we said in the first part. Now everything's just a little more magical, a little more sparkly, and just feels really fun. So that's a secret,
Mm-hmm.
but hopefully that resonates.
Oh, absolutely. What an incredible journey. I have so many questions to ask from there. Let's start with love. You mentioned Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, the foundations to what they share and what they teach is love. It's a big word. What does that mean to you from what you've learned on your journey so far? What does love mean to you? What is
Mm,
that?
wow, what a beautiful question. Love is the uniting force. It's the glue of the universe. And we will never know it to its fullest capacity because it is so expansive. It is beyond the mind, right? It is like that infinite well of resource that we all have access to, and that streams through us. And that is our job to give forth and emanate. Uh, but I think the whole point of being human is to understand what love is through a fully visceral lived experience of relating and understanding how we are one. Even though we live in this realm of separation, I am me and you are you, when it comes down to it, and if those core universal truths that every single great sage has been alluding to is that we are one, well, how can we make that case? How can we build a body of evidence to affirm that that is the truth? And I feel like now we're really coming into this time where we are starting to truly understand what it means to be in right relationship with all things, starting with ourselves, and knowing that loving ourselves is the initial spark that generates that toroidal field of energy that keeps expanding out from that heart center, and that we can now encapsulate bigger space, and we can have a bigger impact on the world just by loving ourselves to a certain degree. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that that also relates to then our immediate circles and our families and the ones within our proximity, and then that expands to community, and then within that there's just this greater connection to great mother energy and great father energy. So how do we love the earth? How do we love all the animals? How do we love all the plants? How do we love the rocks? Like all of these beings, they start to become more of a personal connection. I remember actually during the pandemic, I would go for these walks because there was really not much else to do. And I'd be thinking about my book and different storylines and themes. And then I just walk up to a flower and I would just receive this transmission from the flower. As you know, it was embedded in the geometry. I would notice, oh my gosh, this echinacea has this sacred geometry in it, oh my god. And just allowing it to imprint me in some way with this metaphorical communication of how we're supposed to translate this the transmission to me, I would receive it. And this was something I learned from one of my teachers who was really she taught me about, her name's Elaine, it's the same woman I referenced before. She would talk about the feminine consciousness, which is a lot more symbolic and a lot more metaphorical than the masculine consciousness, which is very literal and linear. And so I was trying to invoke that feminine conscious more and more and more consciousness more and more, so that as I go through the world, I am living as love. I am an emanation of that. And I'm starting to see these connections go beyond the more obvious ones. And how do I build a relationship with the sky beings or the air, or the clouds, or the different elements? And so yeah, it's really just about building the web and like following those threads. And another analogy is the tapestry. It's like every single one of us has that thread, and how we intersect and how we cross pollinate creates that greater image and picture of what we're all painting together, even though we don't even really know what that's going to be. But that is going to just be another representation of who we are, of who we are as love. And one of the tenets that I really go by, which I think is, to me, I would define it as what the priestess path is at its core,
Mm-hmm.
is be love in service to love. And it really is just that simple.
Be
So
love in service of love.
be love in service to love.
Love in service of love. And I think you mentioned it starts with loving yourself. What does that look like? How do you currently love yourself? What does that look like? What are the foundations of that to you?
Yeah, that's another great question. Well, for me, it's really tending to all my parts and all my layers and being devoted to that. One of the things about the priestess path is it's really about understanding how to look at all things as sacred, and it's any spiritual path for sure. But in this way, it's around ritual. It's around how do we show up every single day for ourselves. And I know it all depends on lifestyle and time, and there's many constraints that people are always grappling with. I happen to have a lot of spaciousness and the luxury of a life where I can invest a lot in my own self-care, and I see it as an investment because not only is it good for health, but it's also increasing my capacity to expand. And so I can hold greater and greater space without getting burnt out, and I can expand in such a way that doesn't leave me feeling inflated, or doesn't allow the ego to take the reins and start doing its own crazy thing. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, I think is true leadership also is like when you're self leading and when you're showing up for yourself through certain practices that are non-negotiable. And it doesn't have to be the same thing every day. Like for me, it really is my physical practice. I have to move every single day. Sometimes it's dance, sometimes it's weights, sometimes it's cardio, sometimes it's yoga, but I have to move, and I have to move with my breath, and I have to allow myself to feel into what is present. And I'm actually not a daily meditator. I've kind of switched it up to being a daily communer. I
Okay.
have this practice where I do spend about 5-10 minutes every day, right when I wake up in the morning, and I just check in with my guides. And now I have this deep relationship with Isis. She's the goddess of magic. She's kind of this great mother energy in the Egyptian lineage. And I check in with her, and her and I are building this relationship where I ask her for the guidance and I listen. And that art of listening has really supported me in just knowing how to make that next choice, because we're living in a time of, there's so much that we can do, and of course so many of us are feeling that guilt of like, wow, we have everything at our disposal, but most of us are just wasting our lives. Or I mean, that's kind of a projection, but I think, often we get analysis paralysis or overwhelm when it comes to the many options that we have, even if we are aware of all of these amazing things we could do, and practices and life hacks and biohacks and all of this stuff. But just starting really small, starting with like a couple of key practices. Like for me, I really enjoy doing breath work as well, so I do that every day, and then I also do a cold shower, and that's kind of supported me as well as proper nutrition and just being aware of what's coming in, not just physically, but also my media consumption and all that stuff. So setting really strong boundaries for what I allow into my life, and also just making sure that these kinds of things that I know are good for me happen at the beginning of the day. So that also sets myself up for success. But yeah, there's many other things that I've explored, and I just like jamming on this stuff because even with the Egyptian lineage, there's so much that I'm uncovering now about ways in which they worked with sacred symbols and different breathwork practices and different forms of magic that they're very effective. And so I'm just always an eternal student when it comes to self-care, and because that also is the line of work that I do, is that anything that I come across that is effective for me, I want to immediately share right away. Be like,
Mm-hmm.
"You tried this is a new thing," because I think we're all just walking each other home in this way of how can we be more fulfilled in life. And the best way to do that is to just really tend to all those bodies. And then of course the emotional body is a huge piece. And that's really tied in with the physical body. I remember doing certain dance journeys during the pandemic with one of my teachers, Mana May, and she'd be like, yeah, just so you know, you might break down crying while you're doing this. And lo and behold, here I am breaking down crying and making peace with my mother wound, or just these deeper inner healings that have to happen in order for us to really step into that next level of mastery. And it happens many many different ways. Like I've also been on plant medicine journeys, and breath work was really big for me too, shamanic breath work, different modalities. In there's like there's amazing teachers that have really kind of shown the way of how to hold yourself in through these deeper cathartic experiences. But at the end of the day, you're just still on that journey and exploring more and more of who you are as a human being. And yeah, that's all kind of like, I would say, paying dividends in the long run, because once you have that as a go-to, then you can self-regulate a lot faster. And I think right now, one last thing I'll say before I pass it to you is that as a collective, we are starting to understand that we have these morphogenetic fields around us that are connecting all of us. Our brains are all hooked up to the big the big mainframe of humanity. And there's kind of this, when we rise in our higher consciousness, we are also beginning to expand into this collective field of consciousness. So as empaths, we tend to feel more about what's happening in the collective. And even over the last couple of weeks, I've been responding somatically to all the war stuff, and having these moments of deep anxiety that I have no idea what the cause is. I'm checking my own life and it seems like everything's going well, and then all of a sudden I'm on the verge of a panic attack, and I'm trying to witness myself experiencing this, and then right away I'm like, I'm just gonna ohm for like half an hour and just let it wash through me, and then it resolved. And so I kind
Mm-hmm.
of, like, as a collective, we're learning how to regulate our personal nervous system so that we can also regulate the greater collective nervous system. And that is doing a big service. That's actually how you tap into that higher love, to know that part of your role here is to actually start do the work of transmuting these deeper densities, because they belong to all of us. You know, they're in our waters, they're in our they're stuck in the energy body. And as we do this on this higher level on behalf of the collective, I feel that we can also start to pull ourselves out of some of uh, these predicaments that we're still finding ourselves in, that are not fully aligned to that higher vision of being in that full unity love consciousness. So yeah,
Hmm.
back to you.
Yeah, for sure. So out of all like these different self-care modalities that you practice, there's movement, there's cold showers, there's proper nutrition, there's consumption of media, what media are you consuming, there's oming. Um, the thread that links them all, I believe, is the breath. And you mentioned breath work as being such a key practice in your life. And you said you love to share what's working for you. So yeah, let's focus on that. What's working with you in terms of breath work?
Hmm. Yeah, well, just knowing that the breath is how you bring in spirit, right? It's called inspiration. You know, in French, the word for inhale is inspire. So it's like, yeah, we are bringing spirit in our bodies, and the breath carries prana, life force, and that there is this sacred exchange that happens. So I call myself Flow Priestess because I'm just fascinated by flow and how we move between these different polarities. That kind of alludes back to what we were talking about with the divine masculine, divine feminine, is there's always like one end of the spectrum that we're pendulating from, and then the other. And there is that ebb and flow and that expansion, that contraction that always occurs as we're moving through life. That's actually what animates us. Like, if we were all flatlined, we would be dead. So that, I think, also for me, when I invite the breath into my body, and I do a specific kind called conscious connected breathing. But I've also done Wim Hof with the holds. Like, the conscious connected breathing didn't specifically teach the holds, but I've incorporated the holds recently, and I do like 11 minutes a day. I think there's a Wim Hof video that I always go to. That's sometimes I do it on my own, sometimes I just do the Wim Hof video. And but it's the same principle, that when you allow yourself to be present with what arises through the practice, and some days those breath holds will feel very easy, and some days I'll be like, I can't hold my breath for longer than 20 seconds, even though you're supposed to do like a minute and a half. And so it's really interesting to just monitor over time what's what's here, and to be in full acceptance of where you're at, that you're not really trying to change anything, but the practice itself is an exploration. And I'm also a singer, and I really love vocal toning as another practice. It incorporates the breath, of course, because you have to breathe to sing, but having that exploration as part of my daily practice as well is really key, because I think it's sort of an under tapped in resource, when we know that our voice has the power to encode our field, and that we can actually program our world through the voice, because sound creates shape. And it's really remarkable, because with the power of intention, I think with any modality, what I'll say is that it doesn't matter what you do, it's the intention behind it.
Hmm.
And and working with both intention and attention will bring you to that higher level of awareness, and begin to entrain your being into this higher resonance, right? We're snapping to this greater field that is like our greater holding container, which I see to be held by both divine masculine and divine feminine. And when we just allow ourselves to do that through a practice like breathing, and there's so many different kinds of breath practices, and I've studied many of them, but for me, it's just I like to do it in an easeful state. That's kind of my baseline, is that I also know that I have a tendency towards anxiety. So for me, I use it as a way to regulate my nervous system back to that homeostasis. And humming is another really great way to do that, because it stimulates the parasympathetic through the vagus nerve. There's a lot of science around this as well. But what I really love about it is that it's almost like a baseline that we can check against of like, how am I feeling today through this practice? Is there resistance? Am I feeling expansive? And just to track that over time, because another piece that I want to incorporate is that we are cyclical beings. Women are a little more cyclical than men because we have our menstrual cycles, but essentially we have been also deconditioned out of our cyclical nature because of this patriarchal thing where we have to keep rising and pushing ourselves to the top, and never take any breaks because we'll fall behind and all this stuff. But I think that's being rewritten right now because we are remembering that rest is just as powerful as action, and it's necessary. It's again another divine feminine principle that we have forgotten that there are these fallow states where we need to really be okay with it, being in the nothingness, being in the unknowing, being in the darkness, and navigating through that, and knowing that there will be a rebirth on the other side, and that we'll be better equipped to take on the action it's as things come back into their cycles of flourishing. It really gives us that template to then gives us a little more grace, because still in this society we still like we're pushing ourselves, we're our own worst critics, we're always feeling like we're behind, we're like feeling we're not good enough and we'll never get there. Like all of these things are still very present no matter where you are on this journey. I found like even with really high level people that I've worked with, they're still coming up against the same limiting beliefs. It's just on a different scale. So at the end of the day, when we can just go, oh, this is our design, it's okay to rest, it's okay to take a day off too. It doesn't have to be this like rigid boot camp style like devotion or discipline, let's call it. I do like to see the distinction between discipline and devotion, because devotion is a little bit more forgiving, and it's okay to take those rest days if necessary, but it doesn't mean that you're still not on the path, right? So there's that knowing that regardless, you're gonna take another step forward, and then each step is going to build on the last, and before you know it, you've transformed and
Mm-hmm.
recognize yourself at the end of it all.
Yes. One of my favorite authors, his name's Stephen Pressfield, he describes something called resistance, and that is the negative force in the world that keeps us from fulfilling our dreams. It's the thing that keeps us from, like, you're writing a book, but it's the thing that keeps you from continuing to write it or to publish it, or it's a thing that stops you from doing your movement practice, or stops you from doing your breath work, or that keeps you in bed when you ought to be getting up. What are your thoughts on resistance, and how have you navigated overcoming it? It's something that arises always.
That's a
How have
really
you made peace with it?
yes. Well, I think resistance has also gotten a bit of a bad rep because it's a necessary part of the launching. Like when you think of a bow and an arrow, right? There's resistance when you're pulling back, right? But when you can work with that resistance as like a dynamic tension that is going to propel you forward, then it actually is necessary. And resistance and friction and all of these things, like I see them as polishing agents, really.
Hmm.
You need to be able to work through the discomfort. Like a snake shedding its skin has to rub up against all these rocks or whatever on the ground, and it has to create that tension in order to actually emerge. A butterfly needs to push into its chrysalis and break the walls in order to get out. So resistance, I think, is a really great teacher. I mean, when there's stagnation, that is death, right? So we don't want to be resistant to the point where there is no forward momentum at all, because forward momentum is actually the nature of our planet. We're hurling through space, spiraling through the galaxy. We don't feel it, but this is also the divine design of Gaia. Because we are her, we mimic her. We're just fractals of the gray hole. But when we work with resistance in this way of understanding that all good things need this tension, and I see it in the arts a lot. It's like with storytelling, a good story has tension. It has like moments where you're not sure if the hero is going to make it, everything else will fall flat if we don't incorporate that in. It is required, but our relationship to it is actually the most important thing. So, this is really the superpower, I think, is when we can have the power to observe at the level of source, take on source perspective and be able to witness ourselves as we're going through these moments of challenge or initiation that are going to come up regardless, because we're on the hero's journey. It's like part of our divine design as well. But as we notice and witness, and this is where our free will comes into play, where we can actually make the choice to see it a certain way, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
have the power to frame our own perspective and go, this dynamic tension, this resistance here is fuel, right? Like it is either creating the banks of the, like, if molding the banks so that that river can flow through in a more precise way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's maybe kind of illuminating certain things that aren't working so that we need to make a choice to do something else, or we can, so there's kind of an inner and outer perspective that we need to look at. It's like, are you the cause of this resistance, or is something outside of you the cause of this resistance? And if you're the cause of that resistance, then it's like, let's go back to basics. Let's check the beliefs here. Like, what are the things that are actually at the core root that are subconsciously running the show? And then if it's external resistance, then it's like, okay, am I not communing or listening or uh, observing my external reality to the degree where I'm not cluing into these clues that universe is sending me? Like, so for business, for example, like, the number one thing that is the success factor for a business is adaptability. Like, how can you respond to the shifts? So, if you just have this rigid understanding of like, it's this way and someone else told me it's this way and I gotta go this way, even though everything in your field is telling you it's something else. And often that happens, like, the hard way. The more you ignore the messages, the universe just like hits a frying pan over your head and goes, you're not getting it, and then there's these like
Yeah.
deep moments of quote unquote failure that happen to redirect us, right? Because rejection is just redirection, in my opinion. And so, yeah, how we navigate this, how we dance with it, is really the art of living. And it's just a matter of really being aware. So the higher consciousness is really just, oh, okay, I can catch myself in that moment of being like, oh, I'm just not listening to my higher guidance, or I've not noticed this pattern come up within my own belief system or something like that. So that's how I like to see it, because then it really becomes more of this practice of listening and also responding, or testing it out and throwing yourself out there and seeing what sticks, because it really does take a lot of trial and error sometimes to figure it all out,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
safe and comfortable in that is the key.
Yeah, and I feel like you would have a similar outlook with fear. Navigating with fear would, I feel, it'd be similar to how you navigate overcoming resistance. Can you think of a recent memory of where fear arose on your journey and how you worked with it to transcend?
Hmm. Yeah. Ah, what is the last brave thing I've had to do? I mean, it's just a little personal, but like when it comes to love, I
Hmm.
feel like being brave in love is the greatest kind of courage. I mean, it's called courage for a reason, right? Cœur
Okay.
in French, heart, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
the word encouragement also has that root word in there. And so, for me, like, I'm on a love journey, and I'm trying to find my one, and I definitely put myself out there a lot, and more than I felt comfortable doing, and like meeting new people and saying hi, introducing myself. And that, it comes, there's so much vulnerability in sharing your true authentic self, especially if there is a desire to be met on the other side, or received and loved back, or whatever it is. I would say most people have that experience where they're, you know they're trying to navigate this whole romantic world of how to relate at that level. And yeah, sometimes the feedback is harsh, sometimes it's not what you want to hear. uh, but at the same time, like, through that whole process, it really is about choosing love again, choosing how to love yourself through it, choosing
Mm-hmm.
to accept the outcome, and to know that it really is, it's part of the perfect orchestration of how everything is supposed to happen. um, but yeah, for me, it's been in that intimate heart space that has been the hardest to, because I can overcome other fears, no problem. Like big challenges, like I kind of grew up with this like I'll prove you wrong sort of mentality, which I still feel does serve me, because I mean, I had a bit of a doubting mother, and when I started my business, she wanted me to have some corporate job, and she kind of poo-pooed it until I was doing well, and then she took all the credit, because of course that's how it happens sometimes. I love
Uh-huh.
sometimes, there's a little bit of selective memory there. But for me, yeah, I feel like the true challenge is really loving yourself through all of it, and knowing your worth, like truly knowing your worth, and not being afraid to share your voice and share your truth and speak from that level. Like, and when you asked me that question, there's many different examples I could have come up with, but the one that wanted to emerge was, right now I'm really trying to be brave with love. And that's the honest truth. And it feels like, oh, actually, after speaking it, doesn't feel as hard. Like it's taken
Mm-hmm.
just bringing it to the light. So yeah, that's what I'll say right now I'm working through.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I feel in order to open ourselves to love, we have to grieve what we've lost or what has passed on by. Like for example, your 11-year relationship, there's grieving there, and then you were in your COVID relationship, where you had to and then had an abortion, so you had to grieve like the loss of that child, and then I'm assuming the loss of that relationship since you're opening up for love now. So what have you learned about the grieving process in pertinence to love? Yeah,
Mm,
what have you learned from grieving and how to let go of what was to open yourself to what will be, what's to
yeah,
come?
beautiful. Yeah, I mean, this really comes back to Great Mother as the map, and how she releases and lets go. Like, we're in fall right now. She's releasing the leaves like it's no big deal. Like, I don't need these leaves even though I grew them. Like, everything kind of goes through its own death cycle. And that, knowing that that is the fertilizer, the compost for what's to come, really helps with the letting go process. It doesn't mean that we don't have to go through those stages of really feeling. There are different stages of grief, and but I also know that that is fuel for that next level of creation. So yeah, lamenting those past relationships, or even past versions of yourself, and to go thank you, and just to be really grateful for what has come. Like, that's my biggest practice, aside from doing all those physical practices. It's a practice of gratitude, and being just so in that, knowing that we're so blessed for everything that we have, as impermanent as it is. Everything goes away, we're all gonna die. There's nothing is guaranteed, except for that death and taxes, as they say. But it's like, just allowing yourself to be so in the knowing that because we are impermanent, that we have to live fully, like that every moment is a gift, that it's so precious. Every
Uh,
interaction, it's all fleeting. But just to it just reminds me of how precious and delicate this whole experience of life is. And yet we are, we do have that responsibility also to hold each other through this bigger collective grieving process. Like, grief is not supposed to happen in isolation. That's one of the things I'll say, is like, other cultures, they wailed together. And maybe
mhm.
it's overly dramatic. But in the West, it's like there's a shame around it that, oh, we can't cry, or yeah, we can't feel that or whatever. But now we're realizing, like, no, can we just feel together? The solutions, maybe we don't know what they are yet, you know. Right now it's a big moment in history where we're all just witnessing genocide and trying to figure out, like, what can we do about this.
Hmm.
But what we can do is feel with each other, and I think that's also really powerful, because that then brings our heart feels together, and we realize, oh, all lives matter. Or how can we shift our perspectives, our actions, all these things, so that it's more inclusive, that it's more united, that, you know, it's more in the truth that we are all one and that we're all love. So yeah, for me it really is kind of this thing of, like, how can we feel with each other, how can we use art to soothe the soul through that process as well.
Hmm.
Also the beauty of you know, why I'm so passionate about supporting creative beings is that it's a healing balm when we apply, you know, a good song, and we're feeling something that can support us in the moving of that energy. Then, you know, it will that process will happen faster, and we don't get stuck in these grief cycles where we're in despair, or we're, you know, we go into depression, whatever. So that to me, I think, is really the powerful keys to be able to have that gratitude and then feel together.
Hmm. I feel another piece of the process is letting go. What have you learned about that? Yeah, letting go of that 11-year relationship, or letting go of your last relationship, or um, letting go of maybe your opportunity to have a child. Like, how do you let go?
Well, they say that that's like the highest initiation. Like, it's the crown chakra initiation, is to be in that full non-attachment. Everything else, like all the other chakras, they kind of have like a shadow side and a healed side, and the shadow of the crown is attachment. And so that is it, honestly, is going to be a lifelong process of learning how to let go. But at the core of it is affirming the belief that it will get better, that through every release comes something good. And that's also something that I do put into like my mantra practice. It's like, this or something better, this or something better.
Hmm.
But yeah, letting go is never easy. And also I've had to like monitor my upbringing and my parents' tendencies. And I don't want to knock on my parents, but they tend to have this it's not easy for them to let go of certain things. My mom grew up in a war zone, you know, so for her, having things was survival. But
Hmm.
it's created clutter, and there's been these things that it blocks the flow, right? So if things are just being hoarded, then it's another flow problem, where if you allow for that releasing, and everything is meant to be circulated, right? Currency is called currency for a reason. It's supposed to be,
Hmm.
and we're reworking that whole paradigm as well. And, you know, releasing money, investing in yourself, like, you know, all of these things have a residual effect, because when it goes out there, it has the ability to do its thing and be amplified, and it circles back around tenfold, because that's just the law of amplification. And so I feel like trusting that anything you release will come back around. And also sometimes you have to be the first one to give. Like, if you have capacity, if you can help somebody, maybe just taking the initiative to do that is the right choice. It could feel like letting go. It could feel like you're giving up time that you could be doing something else with. But it actually, if it's coming from that heart space, and there is that deeper guidance and saying, like, no, release this, like, let go of this. um it's really remarkable how the world works in that way, and the energetics and the way things, yeah, really do come back around. It's cool to witness.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
no, I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. We started the conversation by talking about the divine masculine and divine feminine. I have one more question about that, and then we'll get to the final questions I ask every guest. Um, as a male, how can I best serve the divine feminine? And then on the vice versa, it's as a female, What have you learned about best serving the masculine?
Hmm. Hmm. I almost feel like just throwing that question back to you. I think, uh, it's an inner game first. I've definitely studied a lot of different tantric traditions, and asking yourself, how can I serve my inner feminine? Same way I'm asking, how can I serve my inner masculine? That's a good starting point. And then really looking at the allyship, right? How do we support each other in that self-honoring? So there's definitely a process that everybody goes through in asking themselves, like, how have I not honored that aspect? How have I not honored the feminine? How have I not honored the masculine? um, it can be a little bit shadowy going through that process of reckoning, and making amends and peace, and asking for forgiveness. That's another really powerful, sort of understated key, is that we have done things maybe against the divine law or divine order, that have created different residual effects of harm and suffering. And knowing that also, in a higher way, we've all played the role of victim and perpetrator over many, many lifetimes. And people in the spiritual realm are kind of now tackling that. Like, how do I make peace with me as a cannibal in a past life? Like, when you go to Egypt, these kinds of things start coming up, and you have these memories of, like, oh my god, I was like a crazy killer. But this is also, this higher awareness allows us to come into that resolution within ourselves first. And then the only thing that we have control over is how we act now, and how we proceed in the future, and how we treat each other now. So
Hmm.
it comes down to, like, a really deep understanding that, yes, we have been through some stuff, and we're accelerating very quickly. We got to pat ourselves on the back for how far we've come over the last 100, 200 years, in terms of bringing ourselves back into that balance where the feminine actually is now somewhat present. And I think over the last few decades, it's sort of been like feminism was sort of just like, let's put some pants on and be like the men. But that was a necessary step to getting into that more divine feminine embodiment, which is like, no, this is actually equally as important to be in all these other states of being, resting, listening, receiving, all of those things. So honoring where maybe those things haven't been in balance, and then seeing where you can support others in that process, in your relationships, and know that we all have different upbringings, different traumas, different initiations, different lessons to learn in our lives. So everyone's going to,
Hmm.
in terms of their path and what their triggers are as well. Like, for me, I have a really great relationship with my father, and my father is actually very feminine in his energy. So I don't have the same kind of daddy wounding or divine masculine wounding that some others would, where there's like a lot of like abandonment and neglect. My dad was actually more of a caretaker than my mother in some ways, because he had more emotional capacity than her. So
Hmm.
that's also kind of an interesting thing to monitor. So I just encourage anybody to just look at their own dynamics. Start with your parents, start with your brothers and your sisters, how you have related to the opposite sex, and then seeing from a higher perspective, knowing what you know now, how to act in a way that is fully in respect of that that energy, or that quality, and just do better. It's like we're all learning how to do better. There's, yeah, so much now that we're learning about in terms of the the different attachment styles and ways that we relate. It's really fascinating, but the more we know, the more we can then put it into practice and just
Hmm.
better humans. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. And like, I'll meet your challenge. I'm going to answer that question I posed you myself and see what you think. But I think it's inspired by a lot of what you said. So for the how can a masculine best serve the divine feminine? I would say communication, know your worth, set boundaries, and know when to let go. Um, and in that letting go, know that like the universe has better coming to, like if this situation is not the ideal situation for you, walk away, because the universe will reward you for that courage, um, and for embracing that faith versus like the scarcity, like, oh well, like this is pretty good, but if you're communicating and, um, which I think is so key, and the needs are not being met and your boundaries are not being met, um, it's walk away, let that go, and know that better is in process already. Easier said than done, but I think that's what I would answer is just, yeah.
I love that. And I also will say that how the feminine can support the masculine is just to hold space for the emotions to flow as they need to. And that's the big healing on the masculine side, is that yeah, you're emotional beings too.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
repressed for so long, but it's just learning how to hold space on both sides for
Hmm.
what's safe enough to be seen or felt.
Yeah, I think that's so key, on both sides, right? Because this is the kind of the cultural framework is like, yeah, men need to be there to hold space for women. But if, a man shows emotion, it's often met with like, men that are like, deal with your shit, like, or like take care of yourself. I shouldn't be having to take care of you, but I think it's a two-way street, and it's a collaboration.
Yeah, and Brene Brown talks about how much power there is in vulnerability, and I really truly believe that, because that also creates this deeper trust, and essentially you become your authentic self when you're vulnerable, when you're telling the truth,
Hmm.
and when you're, just admitting that yeah, you don't have it all figured out. And when that can be illustrated in a beautiful way through writing or music, I feel like that also unites us at a deeper level, because it's such a big permission slip to know that
Hmm.
perfect, everyone's just trying to figure it out. And
Oh yeah.
admit to that, the more actually we come into our mastery and do get to figure it out. It's like this irony of how like it all operates, that the less you think you know, the more you actually gain in wisdom.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, well said. All right, so I have a last few questions to ask every guest, and we got into that point. Through it all, through the highs and lows that is this hero's journey, what do you feel has been the greatest life lesson that you've learned on your path that in this moment you feel most true to you and that you'd like to share with us?
Just love yourself unconditionally. That's it.
Yeah, well said. In 3 words, how will you describe the experience you're having on this earth? And it doesn't have to be like a sentence, but just 3 separate words, and you can elaborate on these words if you feel called.
How I describe this journey on this earth.
Yeah, in 3 words, how would you describe the experience you're having on this earth?
um, I'd say magical, uh, delightful, and mysterious.
Hmm. Okay, magical, delightful, and mysterious. The word that most piques my interest is magical. What is magic to you?
Hmm. Well, we're kind of coming up to this really amazing time of the year where the portals are opening and the veils are thin, and magic is afoot. And monsters are speaking closely to us, and there's whispers and things. Really, magic. I mean, it's a whole conversation. It's a lifelong pursuit and study, but it's really bringing the unseen into the seen realm. It's the way I see it. It's like
Mm,
bridging the worlds and allowing yourself to be more in this multidimensional space where you get to plug into these abilities, these senses that maybe you didn't think you had. And allowing yourself to go through that exploration and using your imagination. Like the word imagination has the word magi in it, which is about magic. And so to know that you are living the dream and that you have the ability to make anything happen, you are the master manifester. And it comes through that process of going into your own inner alchemy and knowing
Mm-hmm.
you can turn lead into gold as you go through that deeper process of taking what you started with. Maybe you have all these emotional things, these inputs, and then going on that journey of figuring out how can I become that alchemist that has the capacity to transform yourself into the next version of you. So magic for me is really just a process of alchemy. It's of looking at really the inputs and the outputs that bring us into that next level of resonance, because it's all coming back to what we were talking about before. It's like making that case of how are we one, how are we love, and how we can become.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mystery also is intriguing me. One of your words is mystery, and it intrigues me because your upcoming tour that you'll be leading in Egypt is called Into the Mystery, a journey of remembering. What is mystery?
Mm, yeah. Well, this is also part of the divine feminine consciousness of learning how to step into the unknown with grace. And there is this co-conspirator that we're all working with. Let's call it God, source, divine, the universe, that is working alongside us to craft this life. And when I think about the mystery, before it was very scary, and stepping into the unknown was, oh, just terrifying, because it seemed like before, like that there were these really high stakes that I would fail or that I would not know what I was doing. I've since dismantled all those programs, and for me now, stepping into the void, as they call it, is fun because it's a realm of infinite possibility. And the more we lean into that and know that the mystery is just, it's the unmanifest realm that is just waiting and yearning to be manifest through us, through our conscious perception, so that we can uh, get to know our lives better, and that we can also ground those dreams into this material plane and make it happen the way our higher selves want us to create in this world. It really just, yeah, it becomes this childlike exploration and adventure, and you never know, and that's what makes life fun. It really does. Like, I am so all about embracing the magic in the mundane as well. It's like that's another thing I'll just touch on, is that sometimes we think it has to be some big epic thing, some big epic adventure. And it's something I learned in my writing journey, because as you're writing a memoir, you're always asking yourself, like, does this matter? Is someone going to care that this thing happened to me? But like, owning and claiming that part of our story is so important, because yes, it did take a lot of courage to step into the unknown. And when we do that, the more we just like suspend our disbelief and just go, I have no idea what I'm going to encounter in this, but it's going to be cool. And it really does. And then we start, in my personal experience, has been this really amazing discovery of my own gifts, my deeper gifts, like the gift of my voice, and how I can now channel light language codes that are really healing for people and help to activate past life memories and help to correct timelines. And lots of crazy things happen in this private sessions that I do. I would not be doing this had I not just opened my voice during a ceremony one time and just gone, what just came out of my mouth? I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then lean into that and then start playing around with it. So I think stepping into the mystery and keeping that playful energy really go hand in hand. And it's just the way a child operates. So the more we can be like that, the more we'll be able to discover more about ourselves, and then use that to our advantage and make whole careers out of it. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My final question, we played around with time. We've kind of examined your past, we've examined your present, and let's travel into the future. We're going to venture into a time a bit of ways from now. And we're going to be alongside an 85-year-old Leah Sonaria. Who is that woman? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? What is the legacy that you've left here in your 85 years? And what is the predominant feeling in your being?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's like hashtag elder goals. Like, yeah, there's definitely some of my teachers that I look up to and I see how they live their lives, and they're just so vibrant. They're so wise. They have so much lived experience that they're sharing, and they're masters at telling their story. And I definitely want to be the one who looks back and sees a legacy in the body of work that I've left. And that also is what inspires me to continue to show up for my art and my creations. And it's a good reminder in this now moment to just like get back into certain things, because these creations are always like, they're yearning to be birthed through us. And there's like a queue, there's a lineup of ones waiting in the wings, being like, when's it my turn? When's it my turn? And yeah, my goal is really to be somebody who has uh examined their life and really, like, I am kind of a cultural anthropologist, amateur level, but I'm always trying to make sense of society and how we are and what it is that allows us to be in that those higher realms of fulfillment. So when we start to look at, like, yeah, every step matters and every interaction matters, and all the communities that are built up around these forces, when I think of like a really healed elder, I think they're like the hub of a wheel, and they are the 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 anchor for their community. And so building community is also really important to me. And yeah, being in that deeper communion, like there are some really amazing model elders that are just like the oracles for their community, and I do see myself being that in the future, and having a big family and all of that stuff, which is just really amazing to see your lineage grow and the legacy that you're leaving. And something really, I've been inspired by my father, who's a musician, and he's written over 200 songs, and he's recorded about 175 of them, and he's just a prolific creator. And the word prolific really just means bearing lots of fruit. And so, if anything, I just want to be that grandmother tree at the center of the community that's just continually feeding everyone apples. And just being like, there's more where that came from, just keep being nourished by what I'm here to give you. And live on and do your own thing. And that's, to be an inspiration, I think, is really the greatest honor, because that just breathes more life and energy into the next generation.
Hmm. I would like you just to picture this 85-year-old elder um, in your mind's eye, and in your heart. She's vibrant, she's wise, she's a prolific creator, a master storyteller. She's built community, her big family's around her. She's been an oracle. And I want you just to feel into that woman. And I'm going to bring us into the now. I'm going to bring us back where we are today. And that 85-year-old oracle, she sends you a message, Leah. What does she whisper in your ear?
You just said, you got this.
Hmm,
You got this.
you do. You got this. And it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure connecting with you
Mm.
in this
I,
conversation. For others wanting to connect, they could find you on your website, flowpriestess.com. You have so many amazing resources on that website, including your Into the Mastery Egypt tour coming up in December. They could purchase the library of the Incredible Embodied Creative Summit. So that's available to purchase there. And they could also find you on Instagram at Flow Priestess. Anywhere else to send them, and any last closing words if you wish.
Yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out. I also have an online community called the Flow Temple Collective on Facebook, and it's a place where visionary creatives or anybody on this journey can come to share their art and receive resources. And I want to also look at how I can serve that community in a more consistent way as well. So stay tuned, but you can always just pop in and join the Facebook group. And yeah, I'm just here for it all. I'm constantly evolving and learning, and I just love to share everything that I've learned. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity for you to give me the platform to show up in my authenticity. And yeah, all I can really say to everyone is just you got this. Just like my future self told me, you got this. Like anything that you think might be standing in the way of you realizing your highest dreams or being in that highest timeline, just know that it starts with you, and that when you request the support, it will come in. And just be open to things coming in maybe ways that you don't expect them to. And that is really, like we are saying, like the process of stepping in the mystery, and just have fun, have as much fun as you possibly can with this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
why else are we doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To close every conversation, we bring our fist in, a choice to step into the winner circle, a digital fist bump. Boom. Yeah, there we go. Bang. Thank you so much, Leah. And that's a wrap on today's call.